All right, welcome everybody. This is going to be the last panel of the day where we are talking about Grin, which is a brand new cryptocurrency. Has been getting a lot of discussion amongst people who have been in the space for a long time, a lot of hype, obviously for good reasons. So today we have a very distinguished panel of guests joining us. First up, we have Steve, who is currently working on a wallet for Grin and really jumping headfirst into the development of the some solutions for the protocol, and is going to be one of our amazing wizards to talk about Grin today. We also have David Wu, the founder of superlinear.io, and also Joshua Abbot, former Galaxy Digital, Man Group. And I have one other thing to say. I think it's about it. So that wraps up the introductions. Welcome, everybody. It's good to have you here.
Thanks, Sam. It's great to be here right now. Really excited about doing this W3J webcast with everybody here, especially with the the invited guests here. I think we have a lot to say.
Josh, David, do you guys have video, or will you be just audio?
Yeah, so I'm currently actually in a car. In about 15 minutes, I'll have a place to turn the video on, if that's all right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll have to actually work on my video, so hopefully I can get it on before the end of the panel. But yeah, a little bit of technical difficulties right now.
All right. Well, Steve, we'll start with you, and for you, I'd like you to just give a brief overview of what Grin is and what Mimblewimble is, and why it's getting so much hype and talk right now.
Sure, absolutely. Well, basically, Mimblewimble, the story is that there was a white paper that was dropped off into the BTC Wizards IRC chat anonymously. And everyone was kind of like, what is this thing? It's just some random white paper, and people started reading it and they're like, wow, this is actually pretty interesting. So basically what the white paper detailed was the ability, and I'm very, very simplifying it right now, but it details a way of being able to basically prove that there isn't any double spend without requiring addresses or showing every transaction publicly, and it does this through basically a cryptology trick. And what Grin is basically an implementation which has been developed by an anonymous team, and that team has not raised an ICO, no pre-mining or anything like that. They've really just come together just to kind of move forward this really interesting privacy coin. I guess that's the best way to explain this, where you have the scalability of Bitcoin, but the privacy of other privacy coins as well, which is really, really quite interesting. So yeah, and I'm sure Dave could probably answer a bit more on the technical side.
Yeah, it's thanks, Steve. I think it's a really interesting technology, right? So I'm a technologist, and when I looked at this thing, and what I was fascinated by is basically there's this new protocol here that it's actually privacy first, right? So this isn't something where it's kind of like here's a blockchain and let's bolt on privacy. It started off basically with thinking about privacy first, right? So it's a blockchain that is inherently very focused on privacy. Another thing that's I'm pretty excited about from a technology perspective is that this is a blockchain that's have some very interesting scaling possibilities, right? So it's something that I think now that we've got a couple of years of really understanding how blockchain technology is built, they've really thought through how you can actually scale this thing to support large number of transactions and really go beyond sort of some of the scaling limits that we have with blockchains today. So it's really cool stuff on the technology side. Really, really cool stuff.
So when you talk about, Dave, when you talk about like it being more scalable than Bitcoin, what does that actually mean, and what are some of the implementations of that?
Well, so if you start to look at, for example, how Bitcoin is scaling today, right? The amount of storage you actually need to actually, maintain all the UXTOs and things like that, that actually becomes, harder and harder to actually maintain, right? And especially when you start to add in, some of the privacy aspects of it, right? So let's take a look at Zcash or Monero, right? There's these things called the zero knowledge proofs, right? To actually prove that, you actually are not double spending and things like that. Before Mimblewimble came along, these are actually very large proofs. And so the storage required to actually process these things and actually maintain this stuff online becomes larger and larger and larger, right? And so, at a certain point, you're going to have problems with, these nodes where they really can't process it, can't really handle it, right? And what Mimblewimble has done is, they actually took this really neat, cryptographic trick, and they've, really mapped it down to something that, you can actually start to throw away some of this information on chain, and yet, still maintain that, no double send characteristic, right? So it's something that, I think it's really fascinating. And I think, if we're going to see greater adoption of cryptocurrency, we need solutions like this, right? And so, I'm super excited that, here it is, it's something that, kind of marries the privacy part as well as scalability part, all sort of in this, really reduced, really pure blockchain.
So you mentioned some of the other privacy coins that exist, like Zcash and Monero. What are the differences between Grin and the other privacy coins, and what makes Grin so much better than them?
Sorry, Steve, you wanna go first? And I'll jump in on the technical side.
Yeah, sure. So basically, what I think about Grin versus the other privacy coins is, I think first of all, we do have to talk about how the team is really creating this out of thin air, with mostly their own resources. It's not really a play where, the team is taking 20% or anything like that. And I don't necessarily think anything's wrong with that. But it kind of shows that it has a kind of different incentivization. It's not really about the developers of the original concept making money, but instead trying to do something quite interesting and cool, just for the sake of doing it, just for the furtherment of this blockchain technology. Actually, another thing as well is that a big difference between Grin and something like Zcash, Monero, and definitely Dave can speak a lot more on this, but the fact that what Grin does is really take away things from the blockchain rather than add, which does add definitely a bit more scalability to it. And yeah, I mean, definitely there's a lot of key features as well. I actually think that Zcash and Monero might actually be more secure than Grin in certain ways, but what Grin does is that it's much more lightweight, and from a scaling factor of the fact that Grin is always on privacy, and I can't say the same for all the other privacy tokens out there. I know that I believe it's Zcash that is always on privacy as well, but Grin does it as an inherent property rather than something that it's added on. I guess it's not even stored.
Yeah, I think the best way to say it, Steve, is that some of these other options are there. You kind of have to opt in to the privacy, right? So you can either choose to transact without privacy, or you can choose to transact with privacy. With Mimblewimble style blockchains like Grin, there is no option, right? It is privacy first, privacy only, right? So you can't even choose to be a little more transparent. And I think on the technical aspect of it as well, there's a lot of other interesting nuances, right? So for example, Grin, there's actually no native addresses, right? So it's a very different model from other cryptocurrencies where there is no here's my address and you can send me funds, right? It's actually an interactive protocol in the sense that you have to actually do a little bit of work on both sides, the sender and receiver, to actually conclude a transaction, right? And again, I talked about this a little bit earlier, and Steve mentioned again, it's kind of a really stripped down, very lightweight protocol, right? So there isn't notions of things like scripts or anything like that. It's just kind of down to the basic core, right? And I think what's really neat about this, they did a very good job in terms of doing just a basic core, right? So it's a currency, and it has that privacy aspect. It's got the scale, and they just focused on that and did a banged up job, right, doing that.
So one of the things that makes Grin interesting is its inflation rate, in that from the time that it was started until forever in the future that it runs, it's always going to be issuing, I believe it's 1 Grin a minute.
It's
60 Grin.
60, yeah.
60, sorry.
One a second.
Yeah, oh, sorry, one a second. Yeah. Excuse me. So this has brought many people to describe Grin as more of a medium exchange rather than a store of value because of its inflation rate. And in the first year it'll have 100% inflation, 50, and it'll keep on coming down as time goes on. Why would someone, I mean, Dave, you can probably answer this from the technological side. What makes Grin a better medium of exchange than either Zcash or Monero? You mentioned, or Steve mentioned, that it was very lightweight previously, but what other aspects of it or features of it make it a better medium of exchange?
Well, I'm certainly not an economist, right? So, I don't know, if, and I think the jury is still out, right? Whether, this economic policy is the right one, this economic model. But I think, there's certainly, thoughts and hope that, we have this new currency that, has this economic, that I think, hopefully, I think the thought is that, we'll see more stability. That's one of the aspects that you actually need for a transactional coin, right? And the scalability is also, very important, right? So if, the fees that are required to actually process these transactions, sort of, have a lot of volatility or skyrocket, that's going to be a problem. So the hope is that, this economic model and also the lightweight, sort of aspect of this chain will allow it to actually scale and to really, help, sort of manage, the volatility, right? I don't know, Steve. I mean, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I can only speak on what I've seen on the different podcasts and interacting with different people, like being on the Gitter chat and just kind of reading through some of that. But I believe that the original, core devs on Grin, what they're really trying to do is to make something spendable. And when we've seen with Bitcoin, a lot of times you're worried about the price, mooning again, going up, and actually it disincentivizes you from wanting to give any of it out. And if you're thinking that this token is going to increase in price, most likely you don't want to try to sell it on the bottom, so to speak. So that's why the Grin developers are attempting this new inflation model, which is it's not that radical, right? Like, there has been other things that have a similar emission rate, or, you could even look at something that's completely pre-mined and just like dump in a bunch of tokens out. I think that, again, the supply coming in like this, it's definitely something new, but they wanted a fair start. So, I guess, what I've been advocating to a lot of people is that, if you're still on the sidelines and you're kind of speculating, it's okay to wait. And Grin is trying to make it so it's not so much where the earliest people have the huge advantage, but people that come in later can definitely join into the ecosystem and not be at a massive disadvantage, which is another reason why the inflation model was like that. They really want to develop community. They really want to promote spending. It's almost like you holding a grain, it's like a hot potato. You just want to maybe pass it out to somebody else before it drops anymore, right? And of course, you never know. There really isn't 100, different, use cases in the past that we could reference, right? Like, I'm sorry, 100 different case studies that you can reference. Like, this is pretty new. This is pretty experimental. So we're just gonna have to see how it plays out. But I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's definitely worth a shot. And it's got a pretty good shot in my mind right now.
So I guess from an investment perspective, I was reading somewhere that VCs and other investment funds have put something like 100,000 cards, 100,000 mining machines, directing that hash power towards Grin. Why would there be such interest in a highly inflationary currency in its first couple of years? for these investment funds to come in and mine Grin.
So, so when you look at Zcash, originally there was a lot of VC investment and insiders that were, they were basically going out and mining the coin and selling it to the retail investors who didn't have an idea about the long-term inflationary mechanics of Zcash, and therefore a lot of people ended up paying 2, 3, 4, 5 Bitcoin at the time for one Zcash. And when you look at Grin, I think that in the short term there is definitely an opportunity to make a lot of money. And when you're thinking about it as a VC firm, you're not necessarily going in for the technology or going in for anything in regard to things non-related to price. And when you look at it as a sheer investment, the market is down and they are looking for ways, in particular crypto focused funds are looking for ways to have green on their books instead of all red. And this was a very interesting opportunity, and it was definitely hyped up to VCs. As over the last year, a lot of guys that were heavily involved on the technology side said to the people not involved on the technology side, this is very interesting. And that kind of morphed into, we can make a lot of money from this.
Right. I heard several times from people that this was like Bitcoin 2.0, or like what Bitcoin should have been when it was released. I don't know. It just seems it seems to me that there's a lot of VCs who probably missed the initial bull run, who are jumping onto this, hoping for some sort of speculatory increase in the long term. But with the inflation model, it's hard to say if that's actually going to happen.
I definitely agree with you.
Yeah. So I mean, what is good about having all those VCs is that they do have the asset, and they will be working towards seeing it get adopted, or at least seeing its distribution out. Steve, you're building a wallet that's going to probably be the first wallet for Grin.
We're not the first wallet. I believe though that what we're building will be the first graphical wallet. It will be the first cross-platform wallet that supports PC, Mac, and Linux. Okay, sorry, this cat is getting unruly. Okay, sorry, I just walked by the computer. Sorry about that. Yeah, so what we're really trying to do, it's much more than just a wallet, really. It's definitely what we want to say is kind of a gateway to Grin for people who are kind of new. We've learned a lot of lessons from blockchain it's been around since, like over 10 years now, right? So, I don't think we need to start with basically starting with command line again, year one. Instead, why not have something that's easy to use day one? I think a lot of people almost expect it. And with Grin being such a community project, it's really up to people that are crazy enough, like myself and others that are, figuring out like, hey, this is going to be needed in the space. Let's make it. So yeah, it's going to be open source, and we're going to be debuting it at GrinCon US in San Mateo. So if you're there, please come on by, say hi, and we'll be happy to show a demo.
Well, from a technologies perspective, Grin will be able to implement a lot of the things that current blockchains have right now. It's going to be able to have Lightning Network that Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV, that Bitcoin uses. It's also going to have smart contracts in some sort of form, and also atomic swaps. Am I correct on all this?
I think it's actually very interesting. So if you were to take a look at the blockchain, the Mimblewimble, blockchains, actually, they've actually stripped out a lot of this stuff, right? So, by default, they actually ripped out scripting, right? And so, you look at this thing, at the first, look at this, you ask yourself, gee, is this, are we going backwards? Or are we actually losing, capabilities to implement things like smart contracts? Can we actually do Lightning networks or do, atomic swaps? And it's actually really cool. The guys who've been working on this, Andrew Closer is, one of them, they've actually come with, some very interesting solutions to actually, sort of bring back a lot of this technology that, we've kind of been taking for granted on the other side of the world, right? So even though there is no built-in native scripting, there is a concept called scriptless scripts, right? So this idea where you can actually do some of the smart contract processing actually off-chain, and you can actually incorporate things like oracles to actually pick sort of the results of the computation of these contracts, and actually put that on chain, actually declare who the payer to. And so it's actually really neat because this actually, I actually think this actually allows you to actually scale the underlying blockchain much greater, because you're not actually having a bunch of nodes running these computation over and over again like in existing blockchains. And it actually maintains a privacy, right? So instead of having all these open contracts that everyone can actually see, right, on the blockchain, right, you can actually have this actually computed off chain, right, and you can actually maintain some privacy and just have the results of that actually recorded on chain. So I think that's really cool. And I also think that the opportunities that actually exist in other blockchains, definitely exist here, right? So, I think, the jury's still out in terms of, how low we can actually crank down the confirmation times for Mimblewimble today. So the target rate is about, 60 seconds, or about a minute, right, to try to produce a block today, right? And I think, there's probably some talk about, maybe jacking that down. But, I don't think, you can ever jack it down to the point where, you're as fast as, say, Visa transactions, right, or PayPal transactions, right? So, there's certainly a case to be made to actually build, maybe lightning networks and things like that for Grin. And so I think, there's definitely folks who've been starting to look at, using, atomic swaps and things like that to actually enable that. So it's actually really neat. This is a chain that, at its heart is very a minimalistic implementation of blockchain. But yet at the same time, I think, the researchers have definitely figured out, there's these interesting tricks that you can actually bolt on top of this thing, right, to make it just as capable as some of the other blockchains. And actually, maintains a lot of the neat, characteristics, the privacy aspect, the scalability. So, I'm actually super excited in terms of, looking at how this blockchain evolves, because it's just not a rehash of, existing technology. It's when you implement Lightning, we implement, atomic swaps, it's just a little bit different. So from a technology point of view, super excited, because, this is kind of a new way of looking at the world.
So how does the smart contract work on Grin?
So
script of scripts.
Yeah, so I think it's still very new, right? So I think the jury's still out, but the idea is that what you actually see on the chain on the Grin chain is it looks just like any other transaction, right? So there is no vestiges of a script or anything like that. And the way it works is you really essentially utilizing the multi-signature capabilities of Mimblewimble, right? So essentially there's a way to actually, multi-signatures are actually native in Mimblewimble, and I think this concept of the script is this idea that you can actually encode the output from an oracle as a signature on the chain. And so as the oracle maybe processes a smart contract or resolves it like a bet or a prediction, it actually assigns a correct output, a signature on chain, and that actually basically unlocks funds to the correct winner of that smart contract. So it's still really neat, right? So I think I think the paper that went out was probably back maybe like 6 or 8 months ago. I don't think we've seen actual real implementations of this yet. I think this is still something that you've talked about. But I think there's a lot of very interesting neat things we could do this with. There's a lot of opportunities, but it's still early days. Still very early days.
And Steve, what about the atomic swaps in the wallet? How does that work, and how does it differ from traditional blockchains that have been set up so far?
Actually, the atomic swap thing, I'm gonna have to pass that one to Dave. It's another pretty technical one, but yeah.
So I don't know if the audience is really interested in the nitty gritty details, but it is it's quite different, right? So in traditional atomic swaps, right? So it's kind of relatively easy to basically put up these secrets, and essentially when you unlock the secret, it basically causes the release of funds on 2 different chains, right? And so that's how you sort of create the situation where, hey, you know what, I'm trying to trade some of coin A for coin B, and as soon as we decide to actually conclude the trade, that either the trade on both ends have to go through, or it doesn't go through, right? And so traditionally this is done by hash pre-images and things like that, but you actually can't do this on a Mimblewimble style chain, right? Because there aren't things like a hash preimage, right? So essentially, what the community has figured out, the developers have figured out, is that there's again a way to actually leverage multi-signatures, right? Because that's actually that's actually native to the blockchain, right? And there's these things called adapter signatures that allow you to essentially get something kind of like a pre-image going on. So work is that on traditional chains like Ethereum or Bitcoin, there's kind of a secret pre-image key that would unlock. But on Mimblewimble, there's what's called an adapter signature, where as soon as you figure out what the unlock key is for that actually causes the pre-image to be revealed. And so again, this is still very new. I think the original developer actually demonstrated atomic swap both for Bitcoin and Ethereum, but I think it's certainly not sort of commercialized or productized for normal use. And so I think as the community evolves and starts to really look into these sorts of problems and actually start to build them out, I think I'm hoping we're going to see more of this stuff actually being used for the real world, and hopefully that's going to actually solve some of the scam situations that we actually see out there today.
So who would use Grin, or who would want to use Grin?
Yeah, I guess I could take that one, unless Josh, you want to jump in on this. But I actually think that there's just a ton of different use cases on Grin, primarily because like, let's just talk about merchants, right? If I'm receiving my take, I don't really want everybody to know how much is in my wallet. And in a lot of different ways, especially when I've done some BTC transfers, people create a brand new wallet every single time, just so that it doesn't, it's not really obvious how much is inside that wallet, or they need that just to do some kind of verification. But I mean, why should I have to why should I have to show how much I'm transferring to everybody? And why should you know exactly what's inside my wallet? One use case for that was basically, sorry, the dryer's done. One of the use cases primarily is for, if I were to actually adopt this as a currency and you could see what's inside my wallet, you could charge me a higher rate because I have more money. And things like that is just kind of like where the privacy is really important. Other things too is for remittance. If I'm trying to kind of transfer funds to somebody else, like in a legal manner, honestly, like it's not really anybody's business between me and them. So why should I really have to display everything for show, publicly trackable forever? I just feel that privacy is a fundamental right, and all the use cases that kind of fall into that. Like we're promised digital cash, and this is another step closer to that.
Yeah, to go off of that point, when you look at industries, like pharmaceuticals or cannabis or whatever it is, they're not very willing to actually disclose real time their earnings. So when you look at quarterly earnings for public companies, there would be a big opportunity, considering if they were to use a Bitcoin wallet, for people to actually make bets on the next financials or whatever it is. So it opens up a whole nother slew of use cases for larger institutions that could use this to utilize blockchain whilst also maintaining their privacy, which was definitely talked about a lot at Galaxy, and conversations I've had with other people. It's definitely something that will be used in the future.
Interesting. Yeah, could you touch more on that, just in the enterprise institutional use case?
Yeah. So when you're looking at crypto payments, I think that you can think about all of these people that have money in their wallets, and going from that, you have people that would like to spend their cryptocurrency, but merchants will not accept that. And a lot of the reasons for that is the fact that you're using a public blockchain, and there's a lot of counterparty risk, of course, when you're associating with cryptocurrencies. And yes, there are third-party companies that are trying to mitigate that risk, but when you look at this protocol, which is quite unique actually, it will allow companies to maintain their privacy whilst also utilizing that technology. And that's the big key point when you're looking at Grin. It's that it keeps, you know, the coin mechanics, it keeps the blockchain, but it's looking at it in a completely different way. And I think it's looking at it, in my opinion, in a better way, and it's a lot more efficient.
So how would a enterprise or an institution like remain compliant while using Grin to ensure that the funds that they're I guess using or accessing or purchasing come from a I guess a valid user who's not under sanctions or engaged in any criminal activity? But what are the processes behind there to stay within all regulatory and existing laws?
Well, you know, when you look at privacy coins in general, I think all privacy coins have this issue. Zcash has tried very hard to become a legitimate brand and you know, going out to actually regulated exchanges, and now they offer liquidity on that end. And so I don't think that the big question is whether or not this is going to be compliant, because again, when you're looking at, you know, the risk of getting money from a bad source, you're not going to just accept $100,000 payment, you know, from a random person. I don't think that happens in the regular world with US dollars, right? There you still need to know your customer. So when you're walking into a retail front and you take your phone and you scan a QR code and the money's sent, that is, you know, a face-to-face interaction. And in terms of retail experience, that would definitely be a lot better for industries in particular, like, you know, cannabis, where you're not even allowed to use credit cards at any single dispensary, because these credit card companies, since they're federally regulated, will not allow you to process any payments that are considered federally illegal, quote unquote. And so it opens up the possibilities for, number one, a company to, you know, get more payment. And if you ask any merchant saying, you know, I can open up a new way for you to accept payments, they'd probably say yes, so long as there's no catch. And in terms of risk associated with your counterparty, I think that it's up to the actual company itself to make sure that they're doing business with the right people.
Interesting. Steve, this question's for you. When do you think the first provably fair Grin-based gambling site is going to come?
You know, honestly, I think it's going to come quite a lot sooner than anybody thinks. You know, these gambling entrepreneurs are extremely fast to adopt the trends, especially if we're able to, you know, offer our wallet and, you know, allow for, you know, very simple integration. Actually, the way that a Grin transfer works is radically different than Bitcoin, since there's no addresses. And, you know, what it requires is actually this like round trip where I have a file I generate, I have to send it over to you, you have to sign it, and then you send it back to me, and then I upload to the blockchain. Well, you know, that for gambling, especially, you know, let's talk about EOS for a second, because it seems to be one of the most prevalent gambling blockchains out there. I mean, people can lose money instantly, right? You just click a button and you lost it. And I think with something like Grin, I could see them either doing it completely where, you know, you're just doing a wallet transfer, and then if you win, then they transfer something back to you. I mean, something like that definitely can exist quickly, especially if they're just going to reuse the game engine for that. So yeah, I expect to see it quite soon. Yeah.
So, I mean, is there the possibility of second layer solutions?
For gambling, I think it would pretty much, like, let's say that we had a smart contract, right? Like what Dave was saying, absolutely. If we needed to allow for certain gambling sites to allow for atomic swapping, like let's say you wanted to take some stable tokens, turn it into Grin so that you could use that, absolutely. That could be possible as well. There's quite a bit of possibilities here, and the layer 2 solutions, I mean, they're just inherent in all the different things that Dave kind of covered earlier. And the entrepreneurs will figure a way to use them.
Right. So are all of you guys going to GrinCon? I mean, it's one of the things that I've noticed is that the Grin community is very active, and they already have a convention, I guess.
Yeah, I'm definitely going. And this is actually not the very first GrinCon. There was one, I believe, in Germany. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then there was a sort of like Grin convention, not necessarily GrinCon, not that brand, but they had one in China recently as well. So the Chinese market actually, and Asian in general, are actually very, very interested in Grin right now. So yeah. Anyone else going to GrinCon?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm definitely going. I'll be there. Super excited to see what else other folks have been working on. It is supposed to be actually a developer conference. So I hope to see more folks out there that have interesting solutions. I think to date obviously there's been a lot of interest on the mining side, and so I think a lot of folks prior to the launch we're really focused on the mining side of the things. But what I'm excited about is now that it is launched, right? And there's there's plenty of mining pools and folks like that sort of churning away on the blockchain. I'm excited to see what's next, what's beyond the mining aspect of it, right? What do we see the interesting applications? Can we actually start to see some script solutions come out? More community building or more consumer facing projects for Grin. I think that's what I'm hoping to see out in GrinCon.
I am probably attending. Yeah, I don't know what my dates are, but I definitely am looking forward to seeing and meeting all of the community members. And I was really interested to see that there was a Telegram group that went up, and over the course of 1 month it got 11,000 members, and they're people actively posting every day. It's not just a dead feed, and it was completely grown organically. And when you look at the Grin community, it's a very organic community. So I am really fascinated in the technology. I'm looking forward to meeting everyone.
So if anybody that is on the live stream has any questions, just push them in, and we'll put them to the group. I think the interesting thing that is going to be a nice competition will be between Grin and then also Beam as well too, which also uses Mimblewimble, but has a bit of a different distribution strategy. What do you think that it must be I'm going to guess that the answer that pushes Grin over the edge is its community, and then also its I guess base layer technology as well. Am I right on that?
Yeah, so I think that number one, an interesting point to be made is the fact that Beam has a founder's fee. So people in the community in Beam, they're actually somewhat relying on the team to go out and develop use cases for this blockchain. And when you look at Grin, like you said, it is totally community driven, and it's private in terms of the founders and everything like that. So I think that the main difference would be the economic incentive and the structure of the actual the structure of the rewards itself and the incentives to innovate on the blockchain, on each of these blockchains. So it will be an interesting I wouldn't say showdown, but it will be very interesting to see which comes out on top. But personally, I'm a believer that when you incentivize the community more than another coin, you're going to get the heart of that community, and you'll win the support. But maybe someone else can elaborate on that.
Yeah, I just want to add that right now this whole thing about Grin versus Beam kind of thing, I guarantee by 1 year exactly from now, we're going to see like 10 Mimblewimble chains. This is just the very, very beginning. and maybe Grin is going to be the Bitcoin of Nimblewimble, like whatever that means. And we're going to see lots of different offshoots that offer different inflation models. Perhaps I mean, just so many different permutations that can happen from this Nimblewimble. Again, it's really just detailing out a pretty interesting method of proving no double spend, right? So we're going to see tons of different chains coming out, and who knows what's going to happen. There's going to be some ICOs or STOs or whatever you want to call them nowadays, and maybe some more community driven projects as well. I think it's a very interesting time to be in this space.
Is there any one public person who's come out and has gained more notoriety than the rest of the community? It's either been promoting Grin or I guess leading the development of Grin, who eventually you could see the name being attached to.
Yeah, I'd have to say that is Andrew Postra. He's really been like one of the very first vocal influencers, I suppose, that's come out. He's contributed to creating a more, like, I guess, an improved white paper based on the original Nimblewimble white paper with the maths corrected and all this kind of stuff. Other people too is like that Andreas, I can't pronounce his last name, but we all know who we're talking about. And Jackson Palmer has come out. I mean, really, basically most of the trusted technical guys or voices of reason have kind of come out and said Grin is interesting for one way or another, and we just continue to see that. At least from my opinion, the technical people are really supporting Grin. I think it's actually the investment side, and those are the people that are kind of like, well, I don't know about this thing because the inflation model is weird, and who's going to buy this thing? And again, I think they're completely right. I mean, we're all in this as like a giant crazy tech experiment, and it's gaining a lot of traction, which is great. But people should definitely take a step back, and we don't want another tulip fest here. This is I see Grin really, if anything, if not being something that is going to be long lasting, at least a step in the right direction. And I advise people to do your own research. Watching this is definitely a thumbs up. But really really consider about like what you're investing into, things like that. Just pay attention. Don't just buy something just because your friend told you to, that it's gonna moon or whatever like that. Please let's be rational here. And as unrational as I am, really trying to get a open source wallet going, but we're really trying to get adoption going. So I have my reasons.
Well, let's wrap up and get some final comments. Josh, we can start with you, and go on to Dave and then Steve.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much for having this conference. I think that it's great to spread the word about new and interesting technologies in the space. And I think that when you're looking at Grin, it's exactly that, is a new and interesting technology. And the caveat to that is that with new technology comes the high chance of failure. And you look at all of the different implementations of blockchain over the years, and I'd argue that the vast majority of them have not been successful. But like Steve said, this is definitely a step in the right direction, and I am very excited to see what will happen next. As number one, I think that the Grin community is very unique, or not unique in the sense that there's nothing else like it, but I think that there's something special there. And there are a lot of smart people that are advocating for the space in general to migrate towards a point of understanding so that we can see what we can actually do with it. And I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, and likewise, thanks for having us on here in the panel. I'm super excited about this because I think Grin really represents sort of a refreshing take on the crypto space, right? So I think for a long time, we've been doing the ICO thing and all that stuff, and here's this very interesting Genesis story, and very interesting model of, how to actually roll out a blockchain. And a lot of that, really, sort of aligns with, kind of how, originally Bitcoin was rolled out, right? So, I'm super excited to see, if this experiment actually works out. And I'm hoping that, more of the folks out there, join the community, and let's see, if we can get something that's, more grassroots, more community supported to succeed out there.
Yeah, for myself, of course, I'm very, very excited about Grin, what it's capable of bringing. I think, again, people should definitely take some time to really look into this technology. It's worth your time. The white paper is pretty hard to read, to be honest, but there's starting to become more materials about Grin that can be easily digested if you're not a mathematician. And I would have to say, like, I'm quite excited about what this brings to the future. I'm hoping that this actually ends up bringing the digital cash that we've been looking for, and can we have sort of a global, decentralized economy where all of us have a choice to participate, and we basically move on to the next evolution of currency. So yeah, I mean, I sound like a lunatic, but hey, I mean, you got to be one to be in blockchain, right?
We need to get you on a panel with Roger Ver, debating which protocol actually is the best digital cash.
Oh, poor guy! What he did to you? Put him with Roger Ver. Man, no, please don't.
I'll dig it out. I don't care.
Whatever. All right, everybody. Thank you, Steve, Dave, Joshua, for rounding up this last panel. I want to thank you guys again. This wraps up the first day of the Web3 Journal web conference, first one ever. It's been very good, and all the panels have been amazing. I want to thank everyone who was here today, and I want to thank all of our viewers for tuning in, proposing some very good questions that we discussed with their panels. We'll be back at the same time, or a little bit later tomorrow, where we have 5 more panels that we'll be going through with a bunch of very distinguished guests. So thank you again, and we'll see you tomorrow.
And of course, I got to thank you for being an amazing host, and thank every single panelist for being here today. It's been amazing. It's a great experience. I mean, congratulations, Samuel, for being our host. Really good job. In the name of Andrew, that is probably crashing right now because he's been working all day long to make this happen with me. And of course, tomorrow I have, starting at 10:45 a.m. Pacific time, the discussion about blockchain games. Then we're gonna have the future of consumer-focused dApps. Then we're going on a break again, and we get back at 1 p.m. with future of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies discussion on the real-world adoption. And to finish, we discuss dApp infrastructures. So thank you very much for being with us today. Samuel will be here tomorrow with us as well. So that's it, guys. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.